The forest did not speak, but it remembered. Its silence was not empty, it was full of breath, of branch and rustle, of lives lived in whispers and roots that held the memory of all things. In the heart of that silence, a boy no older than 4 crouched by a stream, cupping water in trembling hands, his reflection rippling with the splash. His clothes were not stitched from thread, but from time and necessity, woven from bark, leaves, and strands of old rope. Dirt clung to his skin like armor. His hair, golden and tangled, caught the light like spun straw. He had no name he remembered, no words he could speak, and no one left to tell him who he was. But he was not alone. Behind him, hooves padded softly over moss. A Mustang emerged from the tree line, massive and silent, his coat the color of storm clouds over dry earth, deep, glinting black with flecks of ash gray across his flank. His mane fell like a curtain of night. His eyes, dark and unreadable, locked on the boy with something ancient in them. Not possession. Not fear. Recognition. The boy turned, face unstartled. He reached out, and the horse stepped forward, nostrils flaring, breath soft and warm against the boy's open palm. They did not need sound. In this corner of the world, untouched by machines and voices, they had created a language all their own, one made of glances, of stillness, of shared instincts. Both had been stripped of the world they once belonged to. And in that stripping they had found one another. The boy had wandered into the forest nearly 2 years before. He had been smaller then, barely able to walk. The wreckage of a shattered camper still lay rusting in the ravine a mile north, half buried under vines. No roads led to it now. No search party had come. The forest had taken him in, not as prey, but as something broken and worth hiding. The animals had watched from the shadows. Most kept their distance. But the Mustang had drawn near. Slowly. Warily. Day after day. In time the boy had stopped crying. In time he began following the horse. Now they moved as one. They ate from the same patches of berry bushes. The boy learned to climb the lower branches to retrieve apples from wild trees. The Mustang would stand beneath him, silent and watchful. At night, when the wind carried the howls of predators, the boy curled beneath the horse's chest, shielded by the weight and heat of that broad body. The Mustang did not sleep easily. He remained standing for hours, head tilted toward the dark. They never strayed far from the stream. The stream gave them everything: fresh water, smooth stones to grind roots, and a sliver of open sky. Sunlight broke through there in golden shafts. Butterflies danced along its edges. It was their haven. But peace, like all things in the wild, was never permanent. That morning the boy had found a feather, long, black, and unfamiliar, planted upright in the moss near the stream. The horse snorted at it, pawed the earth once, then circled the area. His ears flicked. Muscles rippled beneath his skin. The boy crouched beside the feather, head tilted. He touched it but did not take it. Somewhere deeper in the woods, a branch cracked. The boy froze. The horse lifted his head sharply, then turned in a swift arc, placing himself between the sound and the child. The boy slowly rose and pressed his face into the side of the horse's flank. They waited. Nothing came. Later, the boy traced a symbol into the dirt beside the stream, a spiral surrounded by dots. A memory? A warning? He could not write, but he remembered patterns. They comforted him. By midday, clouds had rolled in. The wind turned damp and restless. Leaves rustled like whispers. The horse paced along the stream's edge, tail swishing, ears twitching. The boy watched him with wide eyes. He mimicked the movement, walking slowly, carefully, crouching when the horse paused. Suddenly the horse stopped. He sniffed the ground near a patch of soft mud and let out a low, breathy sound, not a whinny, not even a grunt, but something less. He stepped back. The boy came close. A footprint, deep, fresh, unmistakably human. Not the boy's. The boy looked up, heart fluttering. His world had only ever held animals, sky, water, and the soundless comfort of his companion. Now a stranger had stepped into it. A stranger with feet that crushed moss and bent fern stalks. From the trees across the stream, unseen eyes watched. He was large, his face streaked with grime and old scars. Camouflage clothing hugged his body like bark to a tree. In his hands he held a rifle, long and polished. A scope glinted faintly in the low light. His lips moved as he murmured to himself, watching the boy and the horse through the crosshairs. "Well, I'll be damned," he whispered. "You are real." He had heard the stories. An old park ranger had told him of a wild horse seen with a child riding bareback. No saddle, no shoes, no name. A mute boy, feral but unafraid. The kind of tale that made men scoff and hunters listen. If true, this was a legend worth gold. A Mustang that followed a boy like a dog. A child raised by silence. One shot could end the story. One capture could start a fortune. He stayed hidden, calculating. The boy's eyes darted toward the trees. He felt it. Not saw, not heard, asterisk felt. Asterisk his hand curled around a stick. He backed up slowly until his side pressed again against the horse. Shadow stood tall and still, like a statue carved from the bones of the earth. The man didn't fire. Not yet. Instead, he turned and melted back into the forest, like a shadow himself. He would watch longer. He would wait. The light faded. The stream glimmered under a sky now streaked with rose and steel. The boy lay curled against the horse, who knelt beside him for the first time. His breath rose in gentle clouds. In the hush between wind gusts, the boy's eyes fluttered, half open, watching the trees. He did not cry. He had forgotten how. But something new stirred in his chest. Not fear. A memory he did not know was still inside him. Of warmth, of arms that once lifted, of voices that once sang. The ache of absence. He looked to the horse. The Mustang looked back. They stayed like that, awake in the twilight, surrounded by the hush of leaves. And just before darkness fell completely, far beyond their clearing, a single rifle was loaded with slow, deliberate care. Then came the sound, metal against metal. A bullet sliding into place. The forest, once a cradle, had begun to shift. And somewhere deep within its bones, it remembered the shape of danger. The man had always been a hunter. Long before the scars, before the war, before he knew how to track something through brush without breaking a twig, he hunted. First with slingshots and birds in his backyard. Then deer. Then men. Now it was something stranger he pursued. Something whispered about in ranger outposts and stitched into local myths like half-remembered dreams. They called him Griggs. He didn't care for the name. He cared for results. The stories had reached him months ago. Half-drunk ramblings, told by a retired forest warden over a broken map and a long night near a ranger station's fire. A child, wild and wordless. A horse that never made a sound. Some said the child was a ghost. Others said the horse was a spirit. Griggs believed neither. He believed in things that bled. The first time he saw them, it wasn't real. Not fully. Just a blur through the scope, dark horse, small figure clinging to its back like moss. They vanished behind the trees. He could have fired then. Could have brought them both down in one sharp breath. But the shot wouldn't have been clean. And Griggs, for all his cruelty, never fired unless he was certain. So he waited. The forest offered him no kindness. It didn't want him. The air here was too thick, the silence too alive. It pressed in around him like lungs, as if the whole woodland was breathing against his body. He moved through it like a man trespassing on sacred ground. But he didn't flinch. He knew how to make the wild bend. He set snares. Left raw meat in places he thought the boy might wander. Installed motion-sensitive cameras high in the trees. He slept under a torn canvas tied between trees, close to the stream where he'd first seen the tracks. And he watched. Every day he saw a little more. The boy moved like something half-remembered. Quick, careful. Not afraid, but cautious, like he belonged to the place. His skin was sun-darkened. His movements were smooth, almost feline. He never spoke. Never cried out. He never seemed to laugh either. The Mustang was different from anything Griggs had ever seen. Bigger than most, lean like a runner, with muscle that rippled beneath that dark hide like oil over fire. And always silent. Not a single neigh, no snort, no hoofbeat loud enough to echo. They were creatures born from quiet. But Griggs wasn't here to marvel. He was here to claim what the world would pay for. On the fourth morning, he found a path worn by bare feet leading to a patch of disturbed moss. The horse's tracks overlapped the boy's as if shielding them. A single stone had been placed atop a large leaf in the center of the trail. Griggs crouched inspecting it. A message? A marker? He picked up the stone, turned it in his hand, then tossed it into the undergrowth. The forest around him sighed. Later that afternoon, rain crept through the canopy, light at first, then relentless. The hunter sat beneath his tarp, rifle across his lap, eating jerky in silence. He watched the camera feed on his cracked tablet screen, grainy black and white images, movement flickering every few minutes. Then, there they were. The boy crouched beneath a tree pulling something from the roots. The horse behind him, tail swishing slowly. The image was static-filled, the timestamp blinking. But there was no mistaking it. Griggs leaned forward, heart pulsing with the thrill of it. He was close. That night the hunter moved. No fire. No trail. He knew how to walk where even foxes left prints. The wind had shifted in his favor. He followed the stream, his breath slow, measured. In the distance an owl called. A warning if he'd known how to listen. He reached the edge of the clearing near the water. There they were. The boy stood barefoot on a stone slab, arms out as if balancing. The horse watched him, head low, tail still. The light of the moon struck the boy's hair like a beacon. Griggs raised the rifle slowly, painfully slowly, until the scope met his eye. He didn't breathe. But something strange kept his finger from the trigger. The boy stepped off the rock and walked toward the horse. He didn't mount. He didn't command. He just leaned against the animal, forehead to shoulder, like a child to a parent. The Mustang shifted just slightly as if to hold him better. The hunter blinked. He lowered the rifle. The hesitation wasn't mercy. It was calculation. The world would pay more for something living than something dead. If he could capture them both, deliver them to the right buyer, he'd be set for life. Museums. Researchers. Private collectors with obsessions and deep pockets. No need for blood, just strategy. Griggs marked the clearing mentally. Tomorrow he'd move his traps closer. Tomorrow he'd strike. He retreated into the trees without a sound. Across the clearing, the Mustang raised his head, eyes fixed on the dark. He hadn't moved when the gun was lifted. But now he turned slowly, nostrils flaring. He knew. The boy stirred in his sleep. That morning something had changed. The boy awoke restless. He scouted the stream earlier than usual, watched the treetops longer, turned in small, tight circles as though the forest itself felt heavier. He dug up roots he didn't eat. Drew shapes into the mud with a sharpened stick. Circles. Triangles. Then an eye. The Mustang watched. Always watching. Later, as sunlight reached its peak, a twig snapped. Not from a deer, not from a bird landing. It was deliberate. The boy and the horse turned at once. From the undergrowth across the stream, something moved. Not close. But closer than it had ever been. The boy froze. His chest rose and fell quickly. He reached for Shadow's mane, steadying himself. No further motion. Just stillness beyond the trees. Then a whisper of wind. Shadow backed up, gently nudging the boy until they were half shielded by a low rock outcrop. In the woods, Griggs cursed beneath his breath. Too fast. He hadn't meant to be seen. But it didn't matter. He knew now they knew. No more watching. The game had changed. He reached for the rifle strapped to his back. Slid a bullet into the chamber with a soft metallic clink. Slung it over his shoulder. One way or another he'd take them by tomorrow. The forest offered no comfort that night. The wind carried no birdsong. The frogs fell quiet. Even the trees seemed to lean away from the clearing as if they too were afraid to bear witness. The boy sat awake, face lit by moonlight, fingers tracing the dirt. The Mustang stood behind him, alert, breathing slow and deep. They didn't run. They waited. Because in the wild, sometimes survival isn't about fleeing. Sometimes it's about knowing when the storm is coming, and standing your ground until it breaks. The morning didn't rise gently, it erupted. A sharp wind tore through the canopy, scattering pine needles and whipping at the boy's tangled hair as he crouched beside Shadow near the old creek bed. The air was different today. Tense. Too dry. Too still between the gusts. Birds had vanished. Even the insects, usually chirping from every corner, had fallen silent. Shadow's ears twitched. His nostrils flared wide. The boy tilted his head. A scent rode the breeze, bitter, acrid, unnatural. Smoke. He stood quickly, scanning the treetops. In the distance, beyond the ridge, a thin gray veil curled into the sky. Not thick, not yet, but unmistakable. A wildfire. Born, perhaps, from lightning. Or something worse. Carelessness, perhaps. Malice. Or a match dropped by a hunter with more than one weapon. Shadow's muscles tensed, already reading the danger. The horse wasn't panicked, but ready. Alert. The boy didn't need language to understand. They had to move, but not away. They ran toward the ridge. The forest changed as they ascended. The leaves felt heavier, the underbrush crisp beneath their bare feet and hooves. Soot laced the breeze. Still distant, still survivable. But fire was unpredictable. It obeyed no laws but its own. And if the wind turned? They reached the high bluff just as the sun crowned the treeline, and the world beyond it shimmered orange. The fireline was creeping fast. A slow, wicked crawl across the dry brush, licking up saplings and snatching branches in its wake. It had not yet consumed the valley, but it would. The smoke gathered in rolls now, not wisps. And in its path, down in the lowland glade, was the clearing. Their clearing. Griggs would be there. The boy froze. 1,000 moments collided in his mind at once. The quiet of the river, the stone slab where he'd danced, the scent of Shadow's breath, the laughter of birds and leaves and sunbeams he couldn't name but knew like family. All of it could vanish. And then he saw it, movement. In the smoke-shadowed trees near the base of the opposite ridge, a flicker of motion, too smooth to be animal. Griggs. He was moving again. Searching. Hunting. Maybe trying to escape the encroaching blaze, maybe pushing forward in desperation. Driven not by greed anymore but fear. Fire would devour both prey and predator without care. The boy turned to Shadow, his hand curling into the dark mane. They had to go back. Down the ridge they ran, wind turning sharp as embers crackled in the distance. Each step was a beat in a drumline of survival. The forest narrowed around them, trees growing closer together, the undergrowth thickening with vines that clawed at skin and fur. When they reached the lower glade, the heat was palpable. Not close yet, but hovering, promising. Griggs's scent was here now too, gun oil, sweat, and something sharp like rusted iron. Then came the snap of a twig. The boy spun, crouched low. Shadow stepped in front of him, protective. Griggs emerged from the foliage with his rifle raised, jaw tight, face streaked with ash and smoke. "Don't move," he said, voice rough from breathing in too much forest fire and too many years of anger. The boy didn't understand the words. But he understood the gun. Shadow did too. Griggs didn't fire. Not yet. "Come on," he growled, stepping closer. "This place is about to go up in flames. I'm your only way out." He nodded toward the ridge. "You'll die out here." Shadow took a single step forward. "Don't," Griggs barked, aiming the rifle directly at the Mustang. "I will put you down. I don't care how special you are." The boy trembled. Not from fear, but from the weight of choice. He looked at the man. Then the fire creeping over the ridge behind him. Then the horse beside him, steady as stone, breathing like thunder, ready to charge if needed. Then he did something Griggs didn't expect. He stepped in front of the horse. No words. No screams. Just a child, wild and voiceless, daring the gun to challenge his love. Griggs's hands shook. And the wind turned. Smoke rushed over the ridge like a beast unleashed. It swarmed the clearing in seconds, blotting out the sun, turning the forest bronze and black. Embers rode the air like fireflies from a dying world. Griggs cursed and stumbled back. Shadow reared, not in fear but warning. His hooves struck the earth like war drums. The boy pointed toward the north trail, a narrow, winding path he and Shadow had used to reach the High Valley Springs. A path Griggs wouldn't know. One with water. With life. With a chance. Shadow understood immediately. He dropped to his knees. The boy climbed onto his back, fingers buried in the mane. Griggs shouted something behind the smoke, his voice lost in the roar. Shadow turned and ran. They flew through the firelit woods like shadows through flame, dodging falling branches, leaping over logs. Heat blistered the air. The smoke clawed at their lungs, but the boy held tight, face buried against Shadow's neck. He could feel the horse's heart, a wild, pounding rhythm that said we live together or not at all. Behind them trees cracked. Fire danced. The forest wept ash. Griggs stumbled blindly through the haze, following only the faint sound of hooves ahead. But the trail was unknown to him. His boots slipped on loose rock. The smoke stole his vision, then his breath. He collapsed to one knee, coughing hard, rifle clattering beside him. He looked up, and saw them vanish between two split boulders. Gone. He didn't follow. He couldn't. Shadow slowed only when they reached the river bend, the water untouched, cool, sacred. The boy slid off and stumbled to the bank, coughing hard, eyes stinging. Shadow dipped his head into the stream and drank deep. The boy turned, looking back. A plume of smoke was rising behind the trees. But the fire hadn't followed them. Not yet. He sank to the earth, exhausted. Shadow stepped beside him and lowered his head. The boy leaned into him, soot and sweat and tears mixing down his cheeks. He had faced the gun. And survived. But something in him shifted. He understood now. The wild was not forever. And neither was silence. Tomorrow they would go deeper. Or maybe toward the mountains. The fire would change the land. The man would not stop. The world had seen them now, and it would not forget. But for tonight, in the cool hush of the river's bend, they had one another. A Mustang who never spoke. A boy who had never needed words. And a fire behind them that had tried to consume not just their bodies, but their bond. And failed. The sky was pale gray the next morning, streaked with the fading breath of smoke. Dew clung to the blades of grass like tiny mirrors, catching the muted light of dawn. Shadow stood still at the river's edge, his coat damp, his eyes watching the trees as though they might come alive again. The boy was quiet, sitting cross-legged near the horse, his skin smudged with ash and soil, his curls damp with river mist. There was no more fire, only its memory lodged in every branch and every breath. The forest had changed. Birdsong hadn't yet returned. The creatures that once darted between leaves and danced across logs had gone silent or vanished. But even in that quiet, something stirred, not in the forest but in the boy himself. It started as a tremble in his fingers. Shadow noticed first. His great dark head turned, ears twitching as he stepped closer. The boy raised a hand, touched the horse's muzzle and looked into his eyes. He didn't smile. Not yet. But his chest moved with steadier rhythm now. Not panic, resolve. They couldn't stay. The path ahead was unclear, but the forest would heal in time. The wild always did. He had lived his whole life hiding inside it, nourished by its shelter, shaped by its silence. But now he realized the world beyond the trees might be calling, not with words, not with force, but with the faint tug of something unspoken, purpose. He stood, slowly glancing one last time down the riverbank. The prints they'd left last night had already faded. A storm had swept the edges of the fire's destruction, washing away the worst of it. The path they'd taken was no longer visible. Like ghosts who had passed through flame. They moved north. Shadow carried him through narrow passes and over cool streams, through meadows scorched but not lifeless. Sprigs of green already peeked from the earth. Nature, relentless in its rhythm, had begun again. And so did they. For 2 days they traveled, resting only in the shade of unburned groves and moving at dawn. On the 3rd day they saw a fence. It startled them both. Old, wooden, overgrown, but still standing. Beyond it, a field. And beyond the field, a house. The boy had never seen one. His breath caught. He slid off Shadow's back and approached the fence, wary. The structure looked quiet. No smoke from the chimney, no dogs barking, no movement in the windows. But there were signs of life. A stack of cut logs, a wheelbarrow tipped over, hoof prints near a trough. The boy ducked through a gap in the fence. Shadow followed. They didn't reach the porch before the door opened. An old woman stood in the doorway. Her frame was thin, her shoulders wrapped in a shawl the color of dry moss. Her face was lined like bark, but her eyes, sharp, blue watching, held none of the fear or surprise the boy expected. Only curiosity. He froze. She didn't speak right away. Just looked at him. Then at the horse. Then back at him. Hungry? The word floated to him, meaningless but kind. She stepped aside and gestured gently, not demanding, only offering. The boy didn't move. Shadow snorted once, alert. The woman chuckled softly. Suit yourself. She placed a bowl of something steaming on the porch, turned and went back inside. He didn't touch the food until long after she closed the door. That night they stayed near the fence. Shadow grazed cautiously. The boy curled beneath a tree. He dreamt of fire again, but this time the flames didn't chase him. They formed words in the smoke. Shapes he didn't know how to read but felt. He woke at dawn, heartbeat still trembling. Shadow stood guard nearby. The door creaked open again. This time the woman didn't speak. She simply placed something else on the porch. A bundle of clothing. Soap. Water. Then she sat on the step and waited. The boy approached by midday. He didn't speak, he didn't know how, but he nodded once. She nodded back. For the first time in his life, someone met his silence with understanding instead of confusion. That evening he washed. Ate bread and stew. Let her touch his forehead to check for fever. Shadow remained in the field, never more than a glance away. In the days that followed, the boy began to mimic. Her gestures. Her expressions. Her quiet. She gave him paper and a charcoal stick. He drew. A horse. A fire. A man with a gun. And a boy, always the boy with eyes wide and mouth shut. She studied the sketches each evening, never pressing, never asking. But she understood. And she taught. She showed him letters. Simple shapes. How to draw his name. Then hers. Martha. He wrote it slowly. Then pointed to himself. She waited. He tapped his chest once. No sound came. She understood anyway. You don't have to tell me, child, she said. Some names aren't spoken. They're earned. He smiled. Small. Quiet. But real. One morning as they sat together beneath the porch eaves, a rumble approached from the east. Hoofbeats. Fast. Angry. Shadow tensed, ears high. Martha stood, frowning. A rider galloped up the lane, a ranger this time, not Griggs. Younger. Uniformed. Ash-streaked and weary. Sorry, ma'am, the ranger panted, dismounting. Just checking all properties. Fire moved fast through the valley. We had reports of an old hunter, armed, dangerous. Name's Griggs. Been poaching Mustangs. Got caught up in the fire line, they think. No one's seen him since. The boy's fingers curled around the porch post. Martha noticed. She stepped in front of him, shielding him slightly with her frame. You won't find anyone here but me, she said calmly. And the boy and his horse. Been helping me since the fire passed. The ranger tipped his hat. Lucky you. Lot of folks didn't make it. She nodded solemnly. Stay safe, ma'am. When he rode off, the boy looked at her with wide, searching eyes. She nodded once. You're safe here. That night he took the charcoal and drew again. This time he didn't draw the hunter. He drew Martha. And beside her, Shadow. And himself. All standing together beneath the branches of a new tree, one not yet burned. Spring came early. Flowers bloomed near the porch. Birds returned. The field filled with wild grass again. And the boy, still voiceless, began to find new ways to speak. Through signs. Through writing. Through music tapped on the old wooden table. And always through presents. The town nearby heard stories. About a strange boy who rode like the wind and never spoke. About a Mustang who would kneel for no one but him. And an old woman who had lost her family but gained something else. Something wilder, quieter, and perhaps more enduring. And so the boy who had no name, no voice, and no family became something else entirely. A guardian of the wild. A voice without words. And wherever he went, on foot, on horseback, through forest or fire or wind, those who saw him remembered not the silence he carried, but the peace he left behind.